guys, welcome to another edition of Chat with Charlie and Paulette. Although Paulette is not here again. I'm tired of saying that, actually. She will be on later the week. We're going to do some things, but she will be here. But
between me and Ted, we can just be like your co-host.
Ted takes over in 10 minutes. T-minus 10, and Ted turns into the Ted Show.
Zipping it.
But this is our 9th episode, so it's kind of cool. Yeah. And all 9 people have watched it, so that's also extremely cool. I do have some exciting news, though, to share with you guys. We are going to be on Spotify now. We have jumped from YouTube, and we're going to do YouTube stay the same, but we're also going to launch some stuff on Spotify, especially our shorts and some other things. So we're kind of excited about that.
I was just reading somebody's post about other video platforms outside of YouTube. So I'll have to send you over some of the lists that they had.
Please do. I mean, I think that'll be it for right now. We probably need to be there to at least get a little bit of a wider audience and to make sure everybody's seen. Because one thing, great. There's 2 agencies on here, and I'll have you introduce yourself again for those that don't know. But a lot of this stuff is not strictly education vertical. A lot of the stuff we talk about, and I'm sure that your agencies do, is a lot of correlation and transferability to other verticals. So we do want to get into some other spaces that people can appreciate us, especially in the human world of customer service and things like that. So anyways, we're excited. We'll see how it goes and go from there. But now we're going to talk about what not to do with really anything. It could be understanding data, maybe too much, too little, maybe looking at too much. I like to talk about adverts and things you guys have learned along the way of what to do, what not to do. We have touched upon landing pages and the steps in the process and how to capture more based on certain demos that you may have. For us, it's 18 to 35. So if we can jump into it, I'd love to talk about what you've learned over the many, many years that you've been doing this and some things that have kind of resonated from just the open up the window and let's try everything versus there's certain things that have just been tried and true based on your experience and what you've done. And then also please add in, the agency that you're with. I know we got MDT Marketing, we got Martin, we got you guys, but please also add that in there too so some of the viewers can reach out to you and sit on an IV table in a very captured 30-minute moment with Martin. So go.
Hi, I'm Samantha Cornmesser. I'm with MDT Marketing. I am the marketing manager for them for the last 5 years. So I help them find additional clients like Charlie.
Yes, and I've been a very happy partner for a very long time. And if you remember previous shows, and I think Martin said it the other time on one of our other shows, sweaty pipes is a lasting kind of tagline there.
Yes, it is. It sticks with me until the end of time. So you got to watch the other episode in order to understand what that means. But yes,
good job. Thank you for that.
Get you a little plug for you.
Thank you. Good plug.
So I'm Martin Durlak from Canada, Generation Marketing. We help schools find students throughout Canada and the US through lead gen and other marketing initiatives.
Yes, excellent. And we've just met each other and we've had a good time talking shop and everything. So I'm so glad you're part of this and cool. Keep going.
I'm Bryan Kofsky. I'm the sales system engineer at MDT Marketing. We want to help you with your lead nurturing with personalized video and SEO services. And I've been here over 10 years.
So I am, my name is Ted Greeley. I'm with MDT Marketing. So I think for everybody, regardless of whether or not this is the school vertical or anybody else, the biggest thing not to do when setting up campaigns or switching agencies or setting up any kind of new platforms is do not skip the planning, the strategy, the goal setting, and the tracking meetings. Spend the time. It's worth it.
Should that be early on?
Write it down.
And set the ground rules? Right?
Yes.
Right?
Foundational. Before you start building ads, before you start building, even really committing to budgets and moving that around, really, what's the goal? What are we trying to accomplish with this? Is it branding? Is it for impressions? Is it for lead volume? Is it for enrollments or for sales? What is it? And then is this the right platform to get us there? Because a lot of times you find out 6 months into a campaign, like, okay, well, yeah, TikTok's running great for us. Like, oh, how many leads has it gotten us? Oh, well, we don't really measure it that way. If everybody's not on the same page, you're going to have misalignment, you're going to have budget issues, you're going to have a lot of challenges. So take a little bit of time at the beginning, get everybody on the same page before you do the fun stuff, which we all love to do, of creating the ads and coming up with the strategy. Before you do that, how are we going to track this? If we're going to do remarketing, but we have a lead gen budget, well, remarketing is not going to get you the new leads. You're remarketing to leads. It's a conversion.
And there is a difference between branding budget and an acquisition budget too. And I think a lot of schools, I can't speak for them, but maybe you guys know, they kind of confuse the two or don't appreciate the dualism in purpose, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got to have that conversation, know what the goal is, and have tracking set up to accurately measure whether or not you're hitting that goal.
You know, I saw a thing on LinkedIn earlier today, and the statement was too many marketers are chasing shiny objects. They want to be on TikTok. They want to be on this. It's funny I'm saying this. They want to have a podcast. They're trying to do everything and doing nothing well. What do you guys think when I say that?
100% agree. We stick to very paid search on Google. We don't get outside of it. We get tempted with a whole bunch of different shiny things. Never, ever go somewhere else. You know, certainly test some stuff, but not really push our way there. But I just wanted to kind of segue from Ted's.
Can I ask you real quick a question though on that? Is it hard though when you've got a client and especially a new client maybe to help them with that philosophical maybe break on what you're saying versus I want to do it all type thing? Is that tough to do?
I think it was tough when we first started, when we kind of needed clients and revenue as much as we'll kind of do anything for everybody. But now it's like, you know what, we sell a certain level of product, and if you're looking for something cheaper or something we don't agree with, then we just decline. And most of the time, the clients respect that we're in a specific niche, and if you're not as hungry to do the things you don't believe in, then you end up doing the right things. So
and just wasting money.
One of the things that and I've got plenty of Google examples of what not to do, but one of the biggest ones is we typically run campaigns with no budget. So basically as much as we can get. So whenever we set up new ads or new campaigns or new anything, we always have to remember to set a very small budget to test it out. Typically, we've done this mistake many times where instead of picking a province in Canada or a state or Canada, we forgot to actually pick the demographic, and we've enabled the world. And 9 minutes later, $6,000 later, we're like, oh crap, everybody's clicking on this. So one of the most important things, whenever you're testing anything, new ads, new campaigns, set a very small budget, watch it really closely, and then make sure that if you've missed any steps or if you made any mistakes, you'll catch it quickly because you'll hit your budget really quickly. So that's a critical piece. Those
are two really good, important points. And then Martin, I have talked to colleagues. I think people underappreciate testing. I don't know if it's because they get pressure from a board or something like that or what it is, but I don't feel like that word comes up a lot, especially on the need that you have just illustrated.
There's ways of getting data from Google to figure out what to test and how to segment stuff that a lot of schools don't do. But what you can take is a piece of something that's really working well, segment it, and push it even further, or alternatively kind of move stuff around to see if you can get more out of a lemon that is doing really well versus just kind of broadly approaching it. So yeah, testing is critical, and you're not going to grow without testing. There's only so much you can do. You've got to keep trying new different things to keep growing.
Yeah. I know in music, I remember back in the day, I was working with, it was a label, and their philosophy on how to get new music out was almost like, we call it zoning here, Ted, when we talk, but it's very similar, I would think, in what you're describing, but tell me if I'm wrong. So you have a tight cylinder like in music, and you want to own basically your backyard, and you test it. Is it relevant? What kind of demo is picking it up? And then as you slowly grow those bands out, that's how you build that kind of national exposure, and you get the spins on the radio and things like that. And that's exactly what I think you're saying, just in a different type setting, is that testing in a small range so you can see the effect of it, see what you're actually producing, and see if it's relevant. And then you grow from there instead of uncapping it and having all this stuff in your net that you just don't want. Is that fairly accurate as far as an example or an analogy?
I'm going to kind of piggyback off of Ted really quick on what not to do, because something that what he exactly explained is something that a lot of, if you only have like one person in the marketing department, like myself, granted I have a whole marketing agency to sit there and help me out, but again, most of the marketing for MDT is on my shoulders, so I have to do all of the strategy, everything else. And so one of the things that to go along with the whole goal part is to make sure you don't rush, and to give yourself the time and set the expectation that, hey, we want this new campaign. Okay, it's going to take XYZ for this. It's going to take XYZ for that, so that you can start laying out the fact that you need to have that kickoff, goal strategy session with yourself, the team, whatever it is. But that's like a huge piece of it, is just making sure that you set the expectation that needs to happen with whoever your stakeholders are.
I'm not a patient person by nature. And I was just thinking about when you were talking, one of the things that I still do, not as much, but I definitely did before, is I would run a campaign and I wouldn't give it time to kind of percolate, if you will, or if you take medicine, you got to have it build up in your system. And I would react so quick to the limited outcomes and change it. And all I was doing was recreating limited outcomes because I didn't allow the campaign to succeed or to watch. Do you guys see that? And how do you deal with that with clients and the impatientness that, because I've got people I report to, right? Internal people and things like that. And many of them, everybody thinks they're a marketer, first of all, because they buy stuff or they go out. So everybody thinks they understand it, which is okay. I get that. But as someone on the kind of operator side, that's a lot of pressure that you get. And if you're not confident in yourself, you're doing that. And it must drive you guys crazy sometimes, because you're like, look, just wait, give it some time. How do you guys deal with that? How do you communicate and keep that kind of partner going?
I'm sure Ted's got plenty to say on this. I think we've learned that in many cases, as far as mentioning preparation, sometimes it's worth just giving a quick anatomy of a test. We have a white paper on it as well, basically explaining our methodology, where we typically use a holdout group. And then to your point, how long is the test going to run for? We give a quick explanation on statistical significance. We need a large enough sample with a high enough confidence rate. Typically, if you're doing it right, you want to be above a 90%, 95% confidence rate to ensure accuracy. Some people will mess with that a little bit and bring it down to 85. Any lower, you're just cheating yourself. So that's typically how we get ahead of that. We want to focus on statistical significance and not kind of, and actually it doesn't make sense to run a campaign indefinitely. So you might say at the longest, we'll run it this long.
But you have to have a defined shelf life and watch it and understand it. And then, like Martin was saying, you want to test it early to make sure your assumptions are correct and you're not just spending money to spend money, those type of things. But, along those same lines, I came from the old adage, and I've had bosses that every year they wanted me to put out, I can't even think of the word, basically put out for bid other agencies, those type of things. And I always was like, I don't understand that. We just got to know each other. Like we understand how I think, or you understand how I think. I understand how you think. We've got some things that just take some time, that may take 3 years, may take 5 years. High school programs in general, people want it to happen that same year, and a high school program takes really 3 to 4 years if you're really going to start seeing results, and you got to put the time in and not distract them. But how do you guys deal with that, especially always, wanting new clients because you want to build your portfolio and things like that? How do you deal and bridle that type thing, not only from the clients you currently have, but also acquiring other clients that you're bringing into kind of the fold, if you will, the portfolio?
Just add a little bit. So not necessarily from giving it enough time to test, but one of the things we micromanage daily all of our campaigns. So kind of we've noticed the trend with Google, and this has been the same. So if you make a change in Google, it usually takes 2 to 3 days for Google to figure out what to do with it and improve it. And sometimes the first 2 to 3 days are worse than before you made the change, before it starts rebuilding. So you've got to give it some time. So, one of the things we actually do is make a lot of changes on Thursdays and Fridays because volume on Saturdays, Sundays lower. So the cost to those changes is less over the weekend.
Right.
And by Monday, it's already taken effect. So that patience is required. And the other part of it is that sometimes when you do a test, if you don't set it up right or something doesn't really start taking off, it's not because it's not working. It's because possibly you didn't set it up in a way where it should be effective. So you really got to give it that time, and before kind of kiboshing it, kind of fiddle around with it to see if you can get it going. Right?
Do you think, Martin, that we've evolved over time as marketers, that we understand that more than maybe before, where there was, so much at play and so much limited patience for results? Do you think that's evolved in a more positive way?
Yeah, absolutely. The marketer or the person managing campaigns should be watching daily and hourly, but you want to report to clients on a more macro, weekly, monthly level so that they understand there's a broader picture. And having a bad day it doesn't really mean a lot. It's what the month or the quarter kind of looks like. So you've got to be able to manage expectations from that perspective. As long as you communicate it in a broader way and you can hit results that your client expects.
No, it's good. Yeah,
it's important that way. But you still have
I want to piggyback. I want to piggyback off Ted one more time with the planning and goals phase. We've noticed too, it's really important when you're doing a test especially with a client, you want to align on the KPI.
Yeah.
You all have to be saying, this is what we expect. This is the KPI we expect to move. If they're thinking one thing and you're thinking another, you're doomed before you start.
No zingers at the end. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you're off. I remember, working with Ted and Gary early on, and you guys, MDT had always been a partner with us, but I came on and, we were kind of in the honeymoon stage. And I remember discussing that very thing, like certain terminology to make sure we were saying the same things. And unfortunately, Ted and Gary, they had words that I wasn't used to. And so, we weren't on the same page, if you will. And it probably took us a really good year to kind of understand each other, and the certain, what I would call, my industry knowledge is maybe a little different than yours, but we could get there on the same page. The other thing too, and this is a minor example, and I'll just throw this example at you because I don't think it's a problem sharing this, is I remember when I first started and we would look at conversions. I'm going to talk about cost per start in a second because I think everybody's got their own little weirdo formula for that. And I do want to get into that a little bit too. But I remember when I first started, we have things called reentries, which is a reentry is someone that started school, that left school, and then you re-energize them to come back to school. So we consider them a drop. They were out for a certain time. Now they're going to come back and they'll be a student, happy and graduating and things like that. And then we have new students, right? Never been with us, don't really know who we are, that I consider part of the acquisition phase. And one thing that was really interesting when we first started, and Ted, you may not have known this, Gary may have known this. I mean, Gary would have known this, and I don't know if it was shared with you, but our conversions were off because I pull reentries out because it's already a sunk cost. I've got payroll costs in there, but it should be taken out so I can get a true acquisition cost and things like that, where my predecessor did not do that. So for a couple months, because we weren't, and I'll just say me, it wasn't Gary, of course, but me, I wasn't communicating well, and we were like speaking Greek to each other. But it was such a simple thing of how we were arriving at what we were getting to, because I felt, which I think you guys would agree, the true acquisition cost is based on the money you're spending now, and a re-entry is another type of cost. There's payroll costs with that, but there's also maybe some nurturing, but it should be two separate things so you can really understand how your true campaigns are working. But that's just a little example of something that could have gone awry. I could have got pissed at Gary get pissed at me, then I go to another, vendor so I can get what I want. You know what I mean? And the reason why I'm playing a little bit further, if it wasn't for personality and common kind of humbleness across both sides, we wouldn't have got there. But we took the time to understand it, what you guys are saying. We step back and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? Let's talk about the end game. Then we can talk about the journey going forward. And then we discovered it. And it was like, yeah, guys, this is what we're not doing. And Ted, I don't know if you remember this. Gross is something that we use to gross up our application. So it's like your check. You gross up your check, and then the money you have left over is your net. And we have net applications and gross always goes up. And we didn't measure gross here at all here as an institution. And it's a very fundamental thing, I believe, in driving and understanding the healthiness of upcoming student pops and things like that. And you guys hadn't measured it either, because that's not something that was on our mind. It's not saying you didn't want to do it, but it wasn't something that was high on our mind. And I remember early on with Gary talking and getting so excited when we put Power BI in, because then we were managing not a bunch of KPIs, but very succinct KPIs through the conversion, which is our inquiry to our application, and then also the start rate that's from the source, right? From the start till they're revenue producing or starting school. But I say that all to say that's a lot to go through if a partner is impatient and not willing to put that time in it, and he's just like, Martin, figure it out. I'm paying you to figure it out. That's not a healthy relationship, I don't think, from the operator's perspective or the partner's perspective or the client or the agency perspective.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in on that one too. So you're talking about kind of the personalities and the humbleness, being able to kind of have those.
Well, Gary is not you,
Gary,
but I meant
no.
Gary. Yeah,
Egomaniac.
yes,
got it. Yeah. No, but I think it comes to mindset. I'm always very weary of people that deny mistakes, deny that there's mistakes that are out there. I embrace mistakes. Like, if a mistake is a way to, it's the fastest way to learn something new, is to either witness a mistake or have a mistake, understand it, acknowledge it, work through it. And if you learn from it, it's not a failure. It's just a way to learn.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of scenarios. Like Martin had an example about a small campaign that, if you don't click a button when you're setting up with Google, runs nationwide or worldwide and spends.
Open it up. The can's open. Yeah.
That happened to us years ago with a very small client, with somebody that's on this call right now who shall remain nameless but has a beard. It happened one time.
It's not Samantha.
I was told, Bryan, you couldn't possibly screw this up if you wanted to, by the way. Those were the famous last words.
Yeah.
So I get a quick question. As you deal with clients and you want to retain, right? Just like I want to retain students, I want graduates, I want outcomes, those type of things. As you work with the various clients that you have, what do you think is your secret sauce to retention of your clients? Is it just outcomes only or proficiency and performance only? Is it a combination of personality and the performance? Does personality trump it? And maybe you're a little bit, not mediocre, but maybe you're just meeting the need. You're not too great, but you're meeting the need. So personality is a higher value. What do you think your guys' secret sauce is to maintaining good, healthy, long client relationships?
For MDT, for us in general, it's trust. It just comes down to, at the end of the day, our clients have the data. They have we're fully transparent with everything that happens. If a mistake happens, we own up to it. We explain the context and what we learn from it and how it's going to make the campaigns better. But ultimately, it just comes down to the fact that this is what we do. We've got very little turnover. So when you're dealing, like, I've had clients like you, Charlie, for years. So you see the same face. And you know how
you will see a skinnier face soon, just so you know.
Yeah. So that's what it comes down to. That's the secret sauce, is just being very transparent, open. You've got to be innovative. You can't be content. So for us, we cannot just kind of assume that everything's going to stay the same. We always have to be ahead of the ball. But if we're proactive and if we're bringing things to you, that helps build that trust. And we'll put it fully in context. We'll say, we're going to try this thing. We've never done it before. This is how we're going to set up the test. We're not going to waste your budget. Here's the success parameters. Here's what we're looking for in terms of a goal. Here's how we're going to track it. And if it doesn't hit that point of statistical significance, then we'll find something else.
What about, and I get that, and please, you guys all.
Just really quick, Charlie, I wanted to chime in because you had mentioned something you asked us, I think, on a previous episode about MDT and how we've gotten so lucky. And one of the things I think you've even mentioned before on how you hire for your team makes a big difference. So I feel like the personality plays into building that trust, because when you hire somebody to the team, they have to have that same set of values as everybody else on the team.
There's chemistry, right?
Yeah, there's chemistry, but they all believe in the same thing, in helping why are we in this? And we all believe in that why and move that forward. So I think that builds into, again, why we have the trust that we do.
Yeah,
I want to build off Samantha as well. So along those lines on how we're hired, there's a curiosity, there's for learning, and also challenging assumptions, whether that's your own, the clients, or even the results. Where we've seen a campaign where there was a test, we thought we've seen this test. Sometimes we test the same thing for different clients, and we know how it's going to play out, but we want to show you within your environment. And the test shocked us. We've seen it happen so many times where it was a consistent, 10% inquiry to enrollment or whatever it may be. I won't get into the details because I don't want to share information we shouldn't.
No, share them, because especially they're bad. I just want to know them better.
The test was a major failure. And some people would have just been like, that's the way the cookie crumbles. And what do we do? Scrap the whole thing and try the next thing. There was, wait, I need to know more information. I need more data. They're peeling back layers. They're asking questions. They actually ended up arriving that it was set up differently than expected. They drill, and when I say they, Jonathan drilled down and found a segment that was actually more comparable to the intention of the test, saw the result and said, okay, this is what we found. This is how we would have it set up. We saw the results here, and we're gonna redeploy the test in the way that we intended, and that's when we saw the results. So it's always asking why, challenging the assumptions, not taking anything for granted, and that's how we aim to improve.
I'm writing a couple notes here because I should be more structured. So I do so, but I want Martin to answer, and I don't want to cut him off. And then I've got a couple things too on that.
Yeah, in regards to your original question, I think relationship and maybe your own reputation kind of helps you get a new client or get introduced to a new client, but performance and integrity and trust is how you keep those clients. And most of our clients, I would say, we're great friends with. Some of them that are a little bit more distant. We kind of count on the performance and the regular business relationship part of it. But if you can have a beer with a client that has been a client for a long time, even when there's issues and you have the integrity and the authenticity about, and just being honest about what you're doing, then there's a level of trust. Instead of, hey, fix this, or what the hell did you guys do? It's, hey, we've got a problem. Let's work on it together and let's share data to figure that out. Totally different when you get a text that says, hey dude, fix this because it's not working, versus some sort of formal email that that you would get from a client that you don't have a relationship with. So certainly coupled with performance, because if you're not performing, you can be the nicest person in the world, it's not going to last that long. So there's a performance piece, but that kind of helps maintain that relationship.
That's such a good answer, Martin. Not that the other ones were bad, but that was such a good answer. And I think you're right. There has to be correlation and balance. And I love that statement. There's a lot of people that I'm quite sure, and this is not an MDT thing to take it like that, but I'm sure they could give me lift in some area that, maybe my eyes are not on, that maybe something that, you guys, Ted and Samantha at MDT and Bryan, that don't cover. But if I don't have that, like, first 5 seconds of good vibes, or like you say, having a beer with them and able to talk shop and do those things, I like saying have a green tea with them, but I won't do it. I don't care how smart they are. I don't even really care about the performance side of it. So for me, if someone's answering me that question, I am definitely 50-50. The performance has to be there, but that trust and that innate kind of makeup of them matches who I am. And we kind of have that together. And I did. Go ahead, please.
If I could just add in, the other part of it, I find, to be successful is you got to be able to say no and actually reject certain clients. So from, your question was, how do we get clients? How do we kind of lure them and woo them? But the opposite is true as well. Is if you don't know how to say no to a certain client that you don't click with, you don't have that relationship with, or that you don't trust, that is going to have a long lasting good relationship, you've got to say no and move on to somebody else. That'll help you kind of keep your own sandbox clean, working with clients that you enjoy working with and that you have a positive relationship with.
Absolutely. I mean, your reputation, I can tarnish. Just like my reputation, I can talk, you know what I mean? It's vice versa. And you do have to be careful who you're dining with, who you're seen in public with, that type of thing. So I totally agree with that. Do you guys find data's been brought up a lot? And I find a lot of my colleagues, to be quite frank, they don't use data. I think they have data. I shouldn't say they don't use it, but I don't think they use it to make the decisions, the appropriate decisions that they mean. An example of this, there's a couple of colleagues I have that they have these enormous dashboards. I mean, it's got everything. Who's left-handed, who's right-handed, who's this, who's that, and everything. And their performance is not even close to what mine is. And I feel like I use the data, and I'm not saying I'm perfect here because I've learned from a lot of perfect people like Ted, but I use the right data for the right interval to understand what I'm doing. And I get really perplexed when someone wants to show me all these numbers that I'm like, I just need two things. What's the conversion, where it's coming from, what's the start rate, where it's coming from, and oh, by the way, how can I hold a client liable or a partner liable if I'm not having my team perform? And I think a lot of times people get frustrated and they need to look at their own street, meaning their sales reps or something like that, because there's a huge human factor. And I'm going to get in that with cost per start in a second and get your thoughts on this. But I do find a lot of my colleagues are like, they need to do this for us. And it's like, if it's not going to work, I feel like some people forget the other side of that 50% of performance that has to happen, or transparency on what we're doing. A lot of times I'll forget, and I get told, for sure I get told this, but if they don't understand the campaign, if they don't understand if it's a high school campaign or if it's through like a quiz through our website or a certain way, there's different ways of speaking to people and conducting yourself in that kind of rapport stage. And I'm curious on your thoughts. Do you feel like some clients, and maybe not yours, just in general, a generalization statement, do you think people undervalue the performance side with the operator on those performance outcomes? And do they hold you to that in maybe an unfair way? And I don't mean you with your clients. I'm talking about a general question that can be to any agency.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say that in certain circumstances there might be misalignment, especially at the beginning of a relationship, of what the goals are. We might go into a situation when we work with a school, and the goal through the discussion, the goal is lead gen starts, efficiency, and then when we start working on it, everything's kind of rejected. That's not design wise. It's just not really popping out as much as I'd like it to. And then they get more into the design aspect, and then say, okay, so even though this one might perform better, or this one has stronger conversion rate optimization, you kind of like this layout better because it might fit with the brand a little bit more. So you kind of have to find that balance and you don't want to do something 100% because I, Ted Greeley, believe this is the marketing 100% way to do it. But it goes back to that conversation of, what are the goals? You've got budget, it's limited. How do we make this budget fit your goals the best way possible?
But I own that too.
I think that's the key.
Do you know what I mean?
You own both sides. You own a lot, actually. I mean, you're in a position where you kind of own a lot and are really kind of accountable for a lot of the data in the full picture. You don't have that as much, especially with some smaller schools that may or may not have a marketing person that's doing that role solely. They might be an operations person doing a little marketing here, doing a little operations there, maybe a little admissions there. So you kind of have to, again, it goes back to my original statement of rushing through stuff and your stakeholders not understanding what needs to happen in order to evaluate, and having that time given to you to analyze the data that you need to analyze.
No, I guess the statement I'm trying to make, and if I can be humble enough and give advice to any marketers out there, it's 50% who you're working with on your acquisition campaigns, but the other 50% is what you're training like. What's your human capital look like on the ones that are prosecuting those? That tells a full story than just, hey, these guys are not cutting it, I'm going to go to another agency. These guys aren't cutting it either, I'm going to another agency. And I find in some of the discussions that I've had with colleagues is that sometimes gets forgot that, oh, we're doing everything right. It's them. And I see it as a two-way street. And Ted knows I'm not saying something just to say it because it's Chat with Charlie. I mean, there's many times where I know his campaign is working. I'm like, this is on us. You know, we're not converting well, or we're not doing something, or staff is too low, or inquiries are too high. And even though they're good inquiries, they're going right out the window because I can't work them because we don't have enough staff or the right staff. So I guess I just, and maybe it's not a question too, but I want either to acknowledge it or get your thoughts on it. But it's a statement for me as an operator that's a marketer that I have to look at both sides and not hold anybody culpable until I look at myself first and then look at the acquisition campaigns and how they're feeding that, if you get my drift.
Well, and I'll just you kind of touched on something or in a roundabout way that I think is probably one of the most overlooked aspects of the kind of client agency relationship. And that's sometimes they part ways. Sometimes a client, as much as we hate to, see it happen, like sometimes, a client's going to leave. And it might be, like you said earlier, some people have a kind of a mindset of, well, the most work we're going to get out of a partner is in that first year. So let's just change every year and we'll get the most work out of everybody. Sometimes it's just things don't click, misalignment, turnovers, usually a big one internally at a school, and, previous relationships kind of unseat things. The best thing you can do in that scenario is everything you can to make sure the client is successful through the transition. As the outgoing agency.
Absolutely, yeah.
Put in everything you can because they're going to be talking about it and you're going to keep that door open. So if they don't have a better experience, if the other agency comes in and isn't able to improve or doesn't do as well as you do with the experience that you have working with them and building the campaigns, you have that sort of, they can kind of go back and rediscuss what that might be to come back. And we have had clients come back.
The grass isn't greener type thing. It's just like an employee, right?
You've touched on what my not to do is in that little segment. I got a what not to do, special on the client side, and you're about to enter into an engagement with an agency. Do not take for granted the agreement, the contract that you're entering into. Make sure that you own your properties, your Google properties. Be familiar with the Google third-party policies. That is when they get you. And we've seen it. We've seen where you win business. We rarely lose it, but when we do, Ted just mentioned in how to handle things correctly. But there's also when we're onboarding, we're shocked that leads are held hostage, campaigns are held hostage.
We had that.
Promises are made, and then the day before they withdraw them, trying to throw the rug out from under you. We recovered amazingly.
So I'm going to say something, and Martin, I'm sure I'm going to say this about you guys very soon too. When I knew I loved you guys even more than I already did, and that's in a very cool way, just so you know, it's when Ted, and you may not remember this, and I hope you do, and I've said this like 3 times. I got to stop saying that little catchphrase.
My memory is terrible.
Yeah, you got a crap memory, dude. About 2 years ago, I think is when we transitioned from Gary doing some other things, and you transitioned to me more full time. Mm-hmm. And we had a discussion, and we talked about the sources that were producing our graduates, our categories and sources that were producing our graduates. I had never had any other agency be interested in all about the performance on the real result for us and our culture, and that's for graduates out there. And that discussion didn't center around more PPL, more PPC, or, you need more, spend money, that kind of thing. It only interest you had is what was producing the graduates and then plot mapping them and figuring out how we can figure that out. And I got to tell you, man, that did stick with me. I mean, we were already like in a great partnership relationship, but that was a very good moment for me and something I think, people can learn from that interaction, because it wasn't what your importancy was as an agency. It's what the client's importancy was, and you knew it, and we catered the campaigns around that going forward. So there's a little shout
And
out
listen,
there.
and honestly, we can do marketing in any vertical. We're in education for the students, for the outcomes. Like all it takes is literally go to an AIM campus.
Did you say
Any
chew?
AIM camp. I don't think so.
I think you said chew.
Choose.
Oh,
Chew
chew
on it a little bit.
I don't know.
Okay.
You're hungry.
You have a bad
I know
memory.
you're dieting.
Oh yeah. Oh wait a minute. I am famished.
Get him a sandwich. Let's go.
Man, there's going to be some
Another
sound
break.
bites out of this.
But no, we're here. I mean, we're here because we're inspired by the students, by being able to see firsthand what we're doing and the impact that it makes on people. So
And I don't
mean,
want this to be an advertorial. I don't want people to be like
No,
nauseous
no.
from this. But
But
I
it's
mean
true.
it sincerely. What is the client's culture and what makes them successful? And for any school group, it's having graduates, successful graduates.
Mm-hmm.
And the categories that get me there are way more important than the ones that get me in the door. You know what I mean? That type of thing. I'm going to throw another thing quickly at you on cost per start, because I know people look at it a little bit differently. I'm going to say a statement how I look at it, and I want you guys to disagree, agree, and why, or disagree and why, and let's chop it up for the remaining time that we have. The way I look at cost per start, I really don't look at CPI, cost per inquiry. I just feel like no matter what that barometer is, I've got a sales force, like we've already talked about, that's going to influence that. So if it's a higher CPI and I have a lower CPS, I'm cool with this, those type of things. But the CPS side of it, I strongly believe, and I'm going to reinforce this from something I said earlier, a cost per start is not the marketing department or not the agency or something like that. A cost per start is a mutual relationship on what those outcomes look like. And that mutual relationship is what the school group is doing with the acquisition they're getting and what the agency is doing with the acquisition that they're deriving or generating or getting from. And I have been in a couple conversations lately where I have just felt that the cost per start was solely just on marketing or on the agency. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think that's a partnership indicator on your CPS, and it involves both parties. What do you guys think? Do you agree with that? Disagree with that? And that's what the show's for, is disagreement too. So talk to me. What do you think when I say that?
I would say I totally agree with you. Only I come from, again, more of a B2B side of it. But when it comes to looking at like marketing and admissions, it's like marketing and sales in a company. And if I was solely held accountable for a cost per start for these clients, when technically like marketing brings them in, nurtures them, and then it goes into the next stage. There's a whole funnel to this, and it's not just marketing, it's marketing and sales. So as Jules said in a different episode, because I'm going to just keep throwing those out there, smarketing. It's very important that it's a smarketing goal.
Well done.
As the cost per start.
And I want you guys to keep going, but it just frustrates me to no end to have more than I like to say think differently. It's all about quantity. It's all about like PPL. I mean, we could talk a whole show on what we did with PPL in the first 2 years we were in business, as far as our lead mix and how much more healthier we were coming out of it from a system perspective and a cost per start perspective and a margin. But what else? Martin, Bryan, Ted, please.
I would just say maybe the mathematical formula for me would be marketing spend plus admissions expenses 30 days after the student starts. That's your cost per start. Because, in the first 30 days is your biggest funnel of drops. So they're not really starts if they leave before 30 days, but after 30 days, you would expect the majority of them to stick through the end. So that would be your true cost per start. And, there's schools that buy students. So they have a marketing company or an agency that does all the work and says, here you go, here's a student for you. And there's whatever percentage or price they charge. But if you're doing marketing on your own, and you're doing the admissions side, you've got to add those two together to have a true cost per start, right?
And I'll throw one out there. I actually look at it three ways, and I'm curious on your thoughts on this. I look at it right from the beginning. Like once it's revenue producing, I look at what that formula you just described is. I look at it at the 30-day mark, and for us, we know that through the toughest classes, about the fourth class around there, the fourth or fifth class, it gets tough. And that's usually where we see, if you're on a graph, that's where we would see a dip. So I actually run it again at that fourth mod, we call it a fourth class, and see the continuity from day 1 to 30 days to the fourth. And that's really not a change from what you're saying, but I do kind of add a little bit to it so I know what my biggest propensity for attrition is based on class load and just human factors. And for us, it's right at the 4. I mean, it's so apparent on a graph, it just screams it at you. So I do chop it up a little bit differently. Not differently, I add one more flavor to it. So I love that, Martin.
So you were asking who influences it, or from an influence perspective?
No, it's more of a question that, I've been in meetings, it's been on my mind, and I feel like cost per start is a marketing label or an agency label. And I don't consider that one-sided. I consider 50% of that cost per start on the acquisition side of it, and that's me and the agency or whatever. But the other 50% is on the prosecution side, because that cost per start is obviously a derivative of the production work and the revenue producing students we get from it. And I find in my career and through conversations, I feel like people don't look at it that way, from a two-sided thing, or even measure it, Martin, from that perspective where maybe their attrition points are, and seeing, okay, what is our real CPS, and then slicing up the categories that contribute to that, and seeing if there's a pattern of behavior or human behavior. We may label a PPL as a crap inquiry because it's such a low producer, but I can tell you at some of our schools, it's one of our better producers, but it may be a rep that just doesn't work them well. So it's not the acquisition process that's the problem. It's that we have a training opportunity with the human capital. Why should I label in my CPS something to do or not do when I'm not looking at the full picture? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
And I do think that CPS it's a good tool to be able to dive into it exactly like you said. How do we use this to show apples to apples? How does this rep compare to this rep in terms of how they're handling these types of inquiries? We can look at sources. We can look at it's for a specific campus. It's the same team. This source converts at and you can do it by percentage, by enroll or start percent, or you can do it by cost per start when you're evaluating the media source and the cost of generating those inquiries. So I do think that there's not just one cost per start. You got to kind of dive into that.
No, that's my point. Yeah.
Right.
Or how you even divide it. Some people put human payroll in it, and some people don't. Some people put this in it with nurturing. Some people just do acquisition. And I find that people just slap these numbers out there, and they don't know what they're talking about. And I'm not trying to be rude, but that's what I'm really curious to understand is why on this call we were talking like this, but man, I can go to any convention and be at the water cooler and talk about this, and I am not going to hear the same type conversation pattern. Why is that?
They're selling you.
Yeah.
Huh?
there's a different goal for people at the conference. It's to have that
that's my
sales
point
process. Yeah. All right.
I mean, that's the point. And that's, the show I feel is I want them to walk away with something. And I do feel like there's been 4 things at least, and maybe some others that I think are good nuggets. And that's the nugget is if you're evaluating a partnership, a client, an agency, you've got to look at everything, including yourself. And as you all have said, and Martin said it really well, and you did too, Ted, as you diagnose what are you doing together? What is the outcome you want? How are we going to measure it? What are the common terms? And then you go from there. That's how you approach, I feel like, a relationship. It's not sending a LinkedIn email that says, hey, your vendor stinks. I just looked. You're getting this. You should be getting this. Can you do an hour call with me? That doesn't make me want to call them, right? And I'm trying to say to other people that may be looking for client or agencies, what is another way that they can do that, knowing the information that they have to use to approach that? Does that make better sense?
Oh, yeah. I want to know what makes you want to call them.
The only time I would want to call another person that can do what my agencies, my partners do now is if there's a jerk factor and we just can't seem to get along, if there's a dereliction of duty, where you're missing emails, you're not paying. I don't expect people to pick up my calls all the time. I don't mean like that, but there's not a commonality of communication pattern. And then thirdly, if they're not asleep at the wheel. And one of the questions I had, and then you can comment on that, but one of the questions I had that I deal with a lot in my own personal life, and now I'm getting all sappy, but as far as work goes, because I'm in missions and marketing, things are going really good for us. It's gone really good for the last 3 years. Margins are wide open. We're doing very well. We have successful students and outcomes. I can get asleep at the wheel a little bit. And one thing my partners have not let me do is be asleep at the wheel and be on autopilot. And I think, one thing that would also make me leave is if someone allows me to be complacent and not the best thing I can be. Samantha, you may remember this. When I first got introduced to you guys, we had this big call. It was like Hollywood Squares, and we did a little introduction. And I remember saying only one thing. And I didn't mean it like in a weird, rude way, but make me look good. And I'll make you it's a thing. And I feel like that's your job and that's my job, is to make you guys look good on what you do for other clients. And your job is to make me look good and not be complacent. So I would say if any of those things are checked off, Bryan, then yeah, I am picking up the phone call. But I tell you what, it's not because someone sent me a LinkedIn for an hour coffee chat. It's because I've investigated them through other clients that they have and how they approach their business. Right? Martin, I would never know if it wasn't for the relationship that you guys built. And now he's part of that, if you will. And that will never change. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Definitely.
And one of the things I remember when I first met you, Charlie, in person, we had a conversation about your passion with the team. And one of the things that you told me was you like the fact that we tell you no.
Yeah.
That we challenge what you give us. And we're like, no, that's a terrible idea. What are you talking about? And then you talk it through. But we had that relationship to understand, and you appreciated when we told you that let's think of this in a different light. And I know that Gary, really got you with that silent look of thinking.
That damn Gary look. I swear, Martin, have you ever seen the Gary look?
No.
Oh my gosh, the calls. I'd actually text him later. I'm like, are we okay when we first got, because I would ask him a question and he'd look up and I don't know if there was a butterfly or what, and he'd pontificate for a while. And then he'd look at me very stoic, like lips, like very, like not really smiley or frowny. And he would just go, let me think about that. I'm like, okay, I got to go to the bathroom again. I'll come back. I mean, what do you say? And then Martin, I just, we don't know each other that well, and we're going to spend some more time in the next, month or so. But I consider you the same way. I don't think you're a yes person just because they're a client. I think you're going to put your best foot forward, and either you talk it through and you have a mutual understanding, or it's like you may not be the best suited for me. I feel like your philosophy is very similar to MDT's philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. We're definitely slow game. So it's meet, get to know. Like we actually refuse to start working with a new client unless we meet them in person at their campus or at their office. Like it's just a philosophy that I got to know what school you have, what your students look like, what your team looks like before we can build campaigns, websites, whatever else it is.
You did that to me. You even said that to me. You're a student of the game. I mean, you did that with me. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's important to build those relationships. But
so our time is long. I feel like I cut some of you off, so we're going to have some good editing, Mark. And I think we got some out reels when Johnny was here. But I do want you guys, we've talked a lot about stuff, and I think we've stayed fairly structured on the premise of this. So there's two things. One is anything you want to say just to sum up the conversations that you need to say. Two, because of our chemistry, I like this show, and we're going to continue this. And the next show I want to do is on AI. It's such a buzzword right now. A lot of people are using it, and I don't know if they're using it well. I don't know if they're using it bad. I don't know if it's going to replace humans. I don't know if I'll be a robot one day and doing this show. But I would like to also hear when you kind of sign off is what kind of topics do you think we should talk about concerning AI and the use and how it can either impact our vertical, outside our vertical, or anything like that? So there's two questions there, and go.
Maybe I can start because I want to add 2 nuggets that schools can take away
Yes.
from a don't do this marketing perspective. So some very specific Google mistakes that we made in the past. One is so in dynamic search ads where you basically put in 20 or 30 taglines and then descriptions, and then Google selects which tagline to show to each person based on whatever Google thinks. Well, some of the ones we've done is like online courses, start school now, get free info, free assessment. So then we learned, do not ever put the word free into any of those, because what happens on some devices, it puts them together and it says online courses free ... because the device cuts it off. Say free info. So now you're advertising free online courses. So make sure when you've used the word free in any ad text, get rid of it or make sure that it's very restricted so that the entire ad has to show.
Perfect.
That's an easy one, particularly around compliance. There's a lot of challenges you can get into with that.
Absolutely.
The other one is keyword insertion ads, where Google inserts what you're searching for into the actual ad. It's very dangerous. It's fairly clean, but we've seen things like somebody will type in, I'll use an example, school for dummies near me. And your ad says, school for dummies, come to this school. You don't want to say certain things in your ad because it just kind of cuts and pastes it. The way we found it was it actually, somebody typed in a competitor's name, which is a client of ours, and we were promoting a competitor to another client, and it was just a whole mess. We're like, why are you using their brand term in our ad? It was a big mess. So make sure that if you're using keyword insertion ads, don't.
Good.
Yeah, that's it. That's just a couple of nuggets for you guys.
What do you think about AI? What do you think we should topic wise talk about AI?
I think it's a good conversation. I think for me, it's a little overrated. Everybody and their brother and their sister and their cousin, and their dog. If you go to a trade show or a conference, everybody's got AI enabled, AI this, AI that, and we're guilty of it too. We're trying to embed some AI into some of the products that we have, but it's not really. It's too early for schools to worry about, in my opinion. Now, there are some things you can automate. There's a lot of great lead follow-up stuff that I've seen that's AI generated, but from a marketing perspective at the front end, I haven't seen anything really exciting. So I don't think you're behind, or if you're a school yet, but in a year or two, you might be behind. So it's worthwhile having a chat of what's coming up.
With that said, maybe we talk about video nurturing on the next show. I don't think we've really spent enough time on that. Maybe we talk about that. And, I know we're hopeful to do a breakout at CQ together, and maybe that could be a segue into that. So
that'd be awesome.
With what Martin said, maybe we do that. Tell me what your thoughts are as you wind out.
But my thoughts on AI are very similar to Martin's. It's one of those things where don't feel like you're behind. Not everybody is ready to implement the newest technology. If you don't have a CRM yet, then, maybe AI is not quite there yet.
We have a Rolodex. We're good.
But I know AI is a big buzzword. One of the things that our team has been, we have a R&D department that's looking into, how to implement it in a safe way. This is my message for this entire episode. Don't rush it. Don't feel like you have to get on the bandwagon. And AI is part of that. Again, it's because AI just came out, and it came out with a bang, and it was like, and everybody just wants to speak to it. Like Martin said, it's all over the conferences. People are so quick to put it into, we do AI. Do you?
And they have fear of missing out. Everybody's like running because they're just worried they're going to miss out on something.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, FOMO. I'm old, so I didn't know if I could say FOMO. So
I'll throw it in there for you.
So video nurturing, are you for that for the next show or no?
Absolutely. Let's do video nurturing.
Okay, that's 2 votes.
Everybody can. So
would Jonathan ever? No. Who would be a good person to add on this from a video nurturing that's more tactical?
Gary.
Would Gary come on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure
I can make him come on.
Let's do that. We'll get 2 more votes first. I want to be very democratic here. It is an election year.
Nice.
I think both are great.
Are you serious?
I would come
That's
to
it?
both episodes. I would come on both episodes.
Look at you. All right, and your mic works. So your audio is good. So
yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. I can hear you.
All right, 3 votes. All right, Vaseline, don't let us down, man.
Yeah, Absolutely. I think that'd be a good one for
That's
everybody
your
to hear. I
sign
think there's a
off.
lot
Come
going
on,
on.
give us a good Kung Pao Ted sign
So-
off here.
Well, all right. Let me just say, though, a couple of quick nugget for everybody, too, just in terms of what not to do on the marketing side. It is going to be more important than ever to have real organic content, testimonials, videos of actual graduates, instructors. You really have to make what you're putting out there specific to your institution. And that's always been true, but it's going to be more true
prevalent.
as all the content that's AI generated, that's based on stuff that's already out there, as that kind of floods. You've got to be hyper focused on what makes your school different or special.
Yeah.
That's what your content needs to be.
And I'd say you're not an early adopter either. You need to do that, right? It's not like
Yeah,
you're
that
just,
you've got to do, that you can do immediately. That's not something you've got to wait for. Like, that should be done immediately.
Is that
But
something that Martin and you guys do at MDT? Can you help people with that if they're not understanding how to build like you said, Samantha, they may have a one person, marketing department and they need help with that. Is that something both of you guys do? If people can give you a shout on something like that? Perfect.
100%.
Good.
Yeah. But one thing that you must do as an institution as you do that, and this is something that we came across earlier when we did a similar kind of TV production thing like 10 years ago, run background checks on people that are going to be in there. It sounds silly, but there was literally a major production effort that we did, and one person that was included in there, after we produced it, there was an issue that came up with their background. And we had to scrap every scene that he was in. So do the background checks first.
I just did a billboard and I had to do that. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? And we had to do a whole redesign because we rushed, Samantha, because we needed to get it done from the creative aspect. And we didn't do some homework and we had to take something down because of that exact thing. And that's now. I mean, it just happened.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Charlie, I got a spicy soundbite for you. Don't trust Google. There was an instance where we trusted Google. We were getting an admissions team was telling us that the leads were from out of zip. We double checked, we triple checked, we made sure the targeting was right. There was a little bit of tension between account management and the digital team.
Yeah.
They're swearing up and down that we're set up correctly. Get the Google rep to look in and confirm. Google rep comes in, everything checks out. We're like, what's going on here? Turns out, after some team exchanges where we're all sharing what we know, we're all brainstorming on how to resolve the issue. It was like a magical, what we did to solve it. But it turns out, in looking at the value track from Google, where we can see the information that Google has in the lead, and we're marrying it in the lead management system on what's showing that they actually filled out to the form, we were able to actually pinpoint mobile display is causing an issue where Google actually has the wrong idea on their location. And we were able to prove that. We never in a million years would have thought a company the size of Google, where that is so critical, that they would have that wrong. We're like, it's got to be,
which is kind of a rookie mistake on their part. Yeah.
It's so, don't trust anyone. You got to always trust, or don't trust blindly, trust, but verify. And don't make, like I said earlier, don't make the assumptions that just because it's Google that they can't be wrong.
Man, we went dark quick. Background checks on everybody. Don't trust Google. And I don't know what's going to happen when we put this out there. And I'm going to have some, men in black at my door with Google glasses on or something.
Don't mess with the alphabet.
If I'm not here for the next episode, Google got me. You'll know that.
Yeah, I know that. All we're going to see is just a little dust on your chair and headphones. All right. Well, we ran out of time. I hope everybody appreciates the conversation. I know I did, and I really do love talking to you guys, and I appreciate you taking the time. Next show, we're doing video nurturing and kind of what's new on the horizon, too. If we and Gary to kind of look at some things. And I know, Martin, you're a student of the game, too, so please be ready for that. Samantha, Ted, Bryan, if you wouldn't mind asking Gary if he can grace us with his presence, as long as he's not on a movie set or anything, and we can have him on. But we'll plan on that for next episode. But this is season. Good grief. I suck at this job. This is episode 9 we are done with. I really appreciate it. We're going to get a lot of good stuff out of this, and I appreciate all of you. All right, guys. That was awesome. Chat with Charlie with all my good friends here, Martin, Ted, Bryan, and Samantha. We will see you next time for season Good grief. I screwed up again. Edit that mark. We will see you next time for episode 10. Chat with Charlie. Subscribe.